Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. In the last few weeks or even months, we've seen an increasing debate on the topic of comp, or rather, homebrew rules looking at army composition. Now, some people really like it, others don't, and some people say if you've got comp, you're not actually playing Warhammer at all, and they don't want to play. So let's have a quick look at some of the pros, some of the cons of comp. I'm going to limit it to 3 of each and then come out with a few conclusions and thoughts of my own. So what are the 3 main pros that I want to talk about? Well, the first one, moving quicker than Games Workshop. So we've seen updates for Warhammer the Old World, they're pretty sporadic. This is quite different to games like Warhammer 40,000, for example, which seems to change every week with all the various releases, changing the meta, new rules coming out, then you've got the balanced data sheets, you've got the points changes coming out, so there's a lot of change. Very different from Warhammer, but of course Warhammer Old World isn't a mainline game, we can't expect that level of support. But what it does mean is known issues just take quite a while to be rectified, and in some cases they don't really get touched when we do see tweaks being made to the game. What about number 2? Well, originality. If you go to an event or play a game using some comp rules, or in fact some other homebrew rules, it's going to be more likely to be, anyway, a unique experience. It's going to offer different challenges. You're not going to be playing the game straight out the box. And some people really like that. Some people simply don't. But I can see it being seen as a pro, a positive. You're getting a different experience, a unique game of Warhammer, a different set of challenges. What about number 3? Well, using comp, using homebrewed rules, allows people to deal with the egregious, the things that are just so ridiculous, whether it be because something's really strong, really weak, that it actually skews the game and it will change the way you select stuff, because why bother taking the vast majority of things in an army list if you know that maxing out your peg knights is going to win you the game? But there are, of course, negatives, the cons. You've got the problem of inadvertent problems. This is a small tweak to deal with one issue, then has the knock-on effect of causing issues elsewhere. A good example of this is I've seen an event advertised local to me, a 2-day major event, where it has got some comp in it, and they're limiting the number of what they call effectively Lord level characters. So if you think back to the old days of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, where you had lords and heroes rather than just characters, so you can only have one of either a choppy lord or a wizard lord. So you can't have lots of unit duplication amongst your characters, lots of level 4s, for example. There's also unit duplication rules floating around as well. What's the result of this? Well, Empire, for example, can't take lots of wizards. It can't pack out cannon. But one force that is broadly unchanged by all of this is the Bretonian Death Star, the RAF list, if you like. You can take 2 of the same special unit, so Pegasus Knights. You can take 1 powerful lord on a mount. There's your super killy Brett Lord. Yes, this particular comp set also requires you to have a minimum number of banners in your army. That's pretty easy to acquire for the Bretonian list. You've got your Knights of the Realm, your 1 unit of peasants that you have to take. And all in all, apart from having to sacrifice and not have a level 4 wizard, I don't think it really makes a huge amount of difference to that list. But the counters to that list for a lot of factions are suffering inadvertent problems. Then there's the fact that you've got a game that not everyone wants to play, and there's various reasons for this. Some people love the game design as it is. Some people, particularly if they go into an event, want to have had plenty of time to practice and they want to know what experience they can expect. And then there's the people that let's say, the purists who, if it's not written by Games Workshop, aren't interested. And they're all valid reasons for being against comp, because it changes the game that you're used to and it's not necessarily the game you want to play. I'll come back again to example number 1 here. I've decided not to sign up for that tournament because I don't think I can take a list that can deal with what I'm expecting to be flocks and flocks of Pegasus Knights. And as much as you go to events and tournaments to have fun, wouldn't be going in the expectation of winning. I also don't want to spend my whole weekend being battered out of sight by everyone because I can't deal with the main threat that seems to be promoted by the comp. Let's look at con number 3. It's actually a massive enterprise to do composition, to do a proper job of it, to avoid the issues of inadvertent problems and stuff. You've got to go through, make the tweaks you want to do, think about the knock-on effects, then resolve those as well. The danger is you're looking at a full rewrite of the game. Infantry, you say they're not very good, you give them an extra fighting rank, for example. Then think about, what about Linehammer though? Instead of having 10 great weapon armed dwarves, you've now got 20 that are able to fight after that first round of casualties, or up to 20 I should say. And that potentially makes the problem really worse. And we then start looking at how it was in 8th edition with massive unwieldy blocks of infantry backed by a couple of buff spells doing ridiculous amounts of damage, and effectively it becomes pointless to charge them with cavalry. Completely swings the game. Inadvertent problems needing fixing, creating a massive chore. So let's have a think about some conclusions. But before I give my concluding thought, I do think it's worth thinking about how Games Workshop's own approach to house rules has been in the past. Until quite recently, it was a cornerstone. If you didn't like something they said, change it. But of course, Warhammer was supposed to be a beer and pretzels game. A game you played with your mates, garage hammer, if you will. It wasn't built necessarily to be a competitive tournament environment, and we are seeing ourselves, I think, increasingly in that sort of world now, where the game is seen more as a tournament-style game. If you look at the other work that's been done by past Warhammer writers, take Hail Caesar, for example, it's actually written into the rules. This is not a tournament game. This is a game to have fun with your mates, which is why there weren't actually any points originally given to units. That seems to be the ethos of those sort of writers, which we've moved away from. Coming back to conclusions, I think whether you like comp or not, I don't think this argument is really about the answer. Warhammer Old World does have its problems. They're pretty obvious. However, I think the answer to it might actually lie in scenarios rather than playing with the rules. I think the Welsh Open pack was quite interesting from this perspective, because across the 5-6 games that you'd be playing, each scenario was different and leaning into a different play style, into the strengths of a different faction. Interestingly, I was invited at one point. The game didn't come off for building reasons. Not for me to really discuss at length here, but there was a view to get a game in using one of the games from the Welsh Open. And I was going to be pitting my empire against a force of chaos. And it became really difficult to choose a scenario. Why? Because of the available options put to us. One really favoured the chaos forces, one really favoured my empire forces. And that seems a bit unbalanced and became a bit of a ridiculous thought from that perspective. But apply that across a whole event. You can't have an army that will do really well at 1 or 2 of the scenarios, because you'll lose the other 3. And if you want to do well, you need to build an army that competes strongly for some of the games, but compete in all of them. It requires a very different approach to building your army, and it does it without playing with the core rules. So I think absolutely the answer lies in creating effective scenarios, mixing it up so that the default picks for open battle don't apply. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. I know many people do have strong opinions on comp, on scenarios, etc. If you've got something you think is relevant to the discussion here, do let me know down in the comments below. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a good day.